Have you ever felt completely abandoned by hope, standing at the edge of despair, wondering if heaven itself has turned away from your pleas? Tonight, I want to share something that will change everything you thought you knew about prayer, about miracles, and about the incredible power waiting for you in the most sacred place on earth. But first, let me ask you this. What would you do if I told you that right at this very moment, Jesus Christ is physically present, body and soul, in thousands of tabernacles around the world, waiting specifically for your urgent need? What if the solution to your most impossible situation was just one prayer away? If you're watching this video, chances are you've tried everything else. You've knocked on every door, made every phone call, exhausted every human possibility. But here's what most people don't realize, and this might shock you. The most powerful intervention available to humanity isn't found in any earthly resource. It's found in a small, quiet chapel where Jesus waits in the Blessed Sacrament. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and ring that notification bell. Why? Because what you're about to discover has transformed the lives of countless believers, and you're going to want to share this miracle prayer with everyone you know who's facing impossible circumstances. Saint Anthony of Padua, you might know him as the saint you pray to when you lose your keys. But did you know he had an extraordinary devotion to Jesus in the Eucharist? This man, who worked miracles that left entire cities speechless, credited all his supernatural power to his time spent before the Blessed Sacrament. And tonight, you're going to learn the exact prayer that connects his intercession with the living presence of Christ in the Eucharist. But wait, I need to tell you about Maria from Barcelona. 3 weeks ago, she sent me a message that made me weep. Her husband had left her with 3 children, no job, and an eviction notice. She had exactly 7 days before losing her home. She prayed this prayer I'm about to teach you and, well, let me save that story for later. You won't believe what happened next. The truth is, most Catholics walk past the tabernacle in their church without realizing they're passing by the greatest treasure in the universe. They genuflect out of habit, but they don't understand that behind that small door lives the same Jesus who calmed storms, raised the dead, and fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread. Here's something that will astound you. Every single day, millions of people rush past the solution to their problems. They drive by churches, they walk past Adoration chapels, never knowing that the King of Kings is waiting inside, more eager to help them than they are to receive help. Saint Anthony was born in Lisbon in 1195, but his real story begins with a moment that changed everything. As a young Franciscan priest, he was struggling with his calling, feeling ordinary, unremarkable. Sound familiar? Then one day he was asked to preach unexpectedly when the scheduled speaker didn't show up. What happened next defies explanation. This quiet, seemingly unremarkable priest opened his mouth, and words of such power and wisdom flowed out that the entire congregation was transfixed. People said later that his voice seemed to carry the authority of heaven itself. But here's the secret nobody talks about. Every morning before that miraculous day, Anthony had spent hours in silent prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in complete silence before Jesus in the Eucharist? Not asking for anything, not reciting prayers, just being there with him? Anthony discovered something revolutionary in those moments of silence. He learned that the Eucharist isn't just a symbol or a memorial. It's the actual physical presence of God made accessible to desperate human hearts. The miracles that followed were extraordinary. In Padua, he preached to such massive crowds that no building could contain them. They met in fields, and his voice carried to the very back of gatherings numbering in the tens of thousands. Fish came to the surface of rivers to listen to him preach. Wild animals grew calm in his presence. But the most incredible miracles were the ones that happened quietly, in the hearts of people who had lost all hope. But here's what's fascinating, and this is crucial for your urgent need. Anthony never took credit for these miracles. He always pointed to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament as the true source of supernatural intervention. He would say, "I am nothing but dust and ashes. The power belongs to him who waits for you in the tabernacle." Now, before I reveal the actual prayer, I need to address something that might be troubling you. You might be thinking, "I've prayed before. I've asked God for help. Nothing happened." Let me tell you about Roberto from Mexico City. He felt exactly the same way. His business was failing, his wife was seriously ill, and his teenage son had been arrested. Roberto told me he had prayed until his knees bled, but saw no answers. Then Roberto learned what you're about to learn. There's a difference between ordinary prayer and prayer that taps into the infinite power of the Eucharist, combined with the intercession of a miracle-working saint. The results in Roberto's life were so dramatic that his pastor asked him to share his testimony with the entire parish. Most people think of the Eucharist as something that happens during Mass on Sunday. They see the priest hold up the host, they receive communion, and that's it. But what they're missing is the most incredible truth of our faith. That same Jesus who walked on water, who multiplied loaves and fishes, who raised Lazarus from the dead, remains physically present in every tabernacle, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This isn't metaphorical. This isn't symbolic. This is the actual body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, as real as he was when he touched the eyes of the blind man and gave him sight, as real as when he spoke to the storm and it obeyed his voice. Saint Anthony understood this in a way that few saints have. There's a famous story about him that will give you chills. A man challenged Anthony's teaching about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. The man said he would only believe if his mule, which he had starved for 3 days, would choose the Eucharist over food. When the moment came, the starved mule was offered hay and oats, but Anthony approached with the Blessed Sacrament. The animal ignored the food completely and knelt before the Eucharist. Even a simple animal recognized the presence of its creator. But here's what's even more amazing. You have access to this same Jesus right now. While you're watching this video, while you're worrying about your urgent need, while you're wondering if anyone cares about your situation, Jesus Christ is waiting in a tabernacle near you, ready to work the same miracles he worked 2,000 years ago. Let me share something that happened just last month. Catherine from Dublin wrote to me about her daughter who had been missing for 6 months. The police had given up. The family had hired private investigators who found nothing. Catherine was preparing herself for the worst possible news. Then she learned about this prayer I'm about to teach you. She went to her parish church at midnight, yes, midnight, and knelt before the tabernacle. She prayed this specific prayer with Saint Anthony, and something supernatural happened. She felt an overwhelming sense of peace, and more than that, she felt a clear instruction to check a homeless shelter in a city 200 miles away. Against all logic, she drove there the next morning. Her daughter was there, safe, ready to come home. The shelter workers said the girl had been asking for her mother every day for weeks, but they had no way to contact the family. What are the odds? Actually, let me pause that story because I want you to do something right now. In the comments below, type, "Jesus, I trust in your Eucharistic presence." Don't just read this instruction and scroll past. Actually do it. Type those words. Why? Because faith requires action, and the simple act of declaring your trust while learning about this prayer will prepare your heart for the miracle you're about to receive. You might be wondering if there's any evidence that the Eucharist contains supernatural power. Let me tell you about something that will astound you. There have been over 100 documented Eucharistic miracles throughout church history, and modern science has examined several of them with results that defy explanation. In Lanciano, Italy, in the 8th century, a priest doubted the real presence during Mass. Suddenly, the host turned into actual flesh, and the wine turned into real blood. That flesh and blood have been preserved for over 1,200 years without any form of preservation. Modern analysis shows the flesh is cardiac tissue from a human heart, and the blood is human blood type AB. But here's what's incredible. The tissue shows signs of having suffered intense trauma, consistent with severe physical torture. Scientists found no trace of preservatives, yet the samples remain as fresh as if they were taken yesterday. One researcher said it was scientifically impossible for organic tissue to remain in this condition for over a millennium. Similar miracles have occurred in Buenos Aires, Poland, and other locations, all verified by independent scientific analysis. But you don't need to travel to these places to encounter this same supernatural presence. The Jesus who worked these miracles is the same Jesus waiting in your local church. Saint Anthony knew this secret. While other saints focused on extreme penances or mystical visions, Anthony's power came from something beautifully simple. He sat with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament and talked to him like a friend. He brought his problems, his fears, his urgent needs, and he listened for answers. And here's something beautiful. Anthony had his own urgent needs. As a young man, he struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He wondered if God could use someone like him. He faced opposition from other religious leaders who were jealous of his effectiveness. He dealt with illness and exhaustion from his demanding preaching schedule. Sound familiar? The same saint who worked miracles for others also needed miracles in his own life, and he found them through this same prayer I'm about to teach you. But let me tell you about James from Chicago first. 3 months ago, James was facing bankruptcy. His restaurant, which had been in his family for 40 years, was about to close. He had already laid off most of his staff, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. His wife was crying herself to sleep every night, and his children were afraid they'd have to leave their school. James learned about this prayer through a friend who heard about it from someone else who had experienced a miracle. Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? James had never been particularly religious, but he went to the nearest Catholic church at 6 a.m. and prayed this prayer before the tabernacle. Nothing seemed to happen immediately. But that afternoon, a man walked into his restaurant and asked if James would be interested in selling his special sauce recipe to a major food company. James had never thought about the commercial value of his grandmother's recipe, but it turned out to be worth enough to save his business and provide financial security for his family. Coincidence? James doesn't think so, and neither will you when you hear what happened to Sarah from London. Before I share the actual prayer, I need to tell you about the 3 essential elements that make this prayer so powerful. First, you must pray it in the presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. This isn't optional. This isn't just a nice addition. The Eucharist is where heaven touches earth, where the infinite power of God becomes accessible to finite human need. Second, you must invoke the intercession of Saint Anthony with specific faith in his special relationship with the Eucharist. Anthony isn't just another saint you're asking to pray for you. He's a saint who discovered the secret of Eucharistic power and used it to work miracles that amazed entire cities. Third, and this might be the most important part, you must pray with complete surrender to God's will, while simultaneously maintaining absolute confidence that God wants to help you. This sounds contradictory, but it's actually the perfect balance of faith. You trust that God knows what's best, but you also believe that He desires your good more than you desire it yourself. Here's the prayer that has changed thousands of lives. Jesus, my Lord and my God, truly present in this Blessed Sacrament, I come before you with complete trust in your infinite mercy and power. You who fed the multitudes, who calmed the storms, who raised the dead, you are the same yesterday, today, and forever. I believe that you are here, as real as when you walked the roads of Galilee, as powerful as when you spoke and creation obeyed. Saint Anthony of Padua, faithful friend of Jesus in the Eucharist, you who spent countless hours in prayer before this same Lord, you who experienced His miraculous power in your own life and ministry, I ask for your intercession in my urgent need. You know what it means to feel lost, to face impossible circumstances, to wonder if God sees our struggles. Please carry my petition to the throne of grace. Jesus, I place before you my situation. Here you specifically name your urgent need. I don't understand why this is happening. I don't know how it can be resolved, but I know that you are the God of the impossible. I know that nothing is too difficult for you. I surrender this burden completely into your sacred hands, trusting that your love for me is greater than my fear, your power greater than my problem. Saint Anthony, miracle worker, finder of lost things, restorer of hope, please intercede for me now. Ask Jesus to look upon my need with the same compassion he showed to the widow of Nain, to the father of the demon-possessed boy, to Martha and Mary at the tomb of Lazarus. Ask him to work in my situation with the same power that raised him from the dead. Jesus, I don't ask you to remove all challenges from my life, but I do ask you to show me your presence in this trial. Give me the grace to trust you completely, the strength to endure whatever comes, and the wisdom to recognize your hand at work, even when I cannot understand your ways. I make this prayer in union with all the angels and saints, in union with your most sacred heart, in union with the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. But here's the crucial part. You can't just say this prayer once and walk away. You need to pray it with the persistence of the widow in Jesus' parable, who kept bothering the judge until he gave her justice. You need to return to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament day after day, bringing your need before him with unwavering faith. Let me ask you something. Are you ready to make that commitment? Are you willing to rearrange your schedule, to get up earlier or stay up later, to make time for Jesus in the tabernacle? Because miracles aren't vending machine transactions, they're relationship responses. God works miracles for people who take time to be with him. Now I promised I'd finish Maria's story from Barcelona. Remember, she had 7 days before eviction, 3 children to feed, and no apparent way out. She prayed this prayer every morning for 6 days in the church near her apartment. On the 7th day, the day she was supposed to be evicted, her estranged sister called from Canada. The sister had been thinking about Maria constantly and couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to help. She offered to pay Maria's rent for 6 months and to help her find work through her company's international connections. They hadn't spoken in 5 years, but something had compelled the sister to reach out at exactly the right moment. What I'm about to share with you might sound too good to be true, but I have dozens of documented testimonies from people who have prayed this prayer with extraordinary results. These aren't anonymous internet stories. These are real people with real names who are willing to share their experiences because they're so grateful for what God has done. Michael from Detroit was facing a diagnosis that his doctors said was terminal. He had maybe 6 months to live, and traditional treatments weren't working. His wife found this prayer online and begged him to try it, even though he had lost most of his faith years earlier. Michael told me he went to the Catholic church near his house, more out of love for my wife than belief in miracles. He prayed this prayer every day for 2 weeks. During his next medical appointment, the doctors were puzzled. The scans showed significant improvement that they couldn't explain medically. 6 months later, Michael was declared cancer-free. His oncologist admitted he had never seen anything like it in 30 years of practice. But here's what Michael says was the real miracle. Not just the physical healing, but the restoration of his faith and the complete transformation of his relationship with his family. He told me, "I got my life back in every way that matters." Then there's Patricia from Sydney, Australia. Her son had been addicted to drugs for 8 years. He had been in and out of rehab programs, had stolen from the family, had been arrested multiple times. Patricia had reached the point where she was afraid to answer her phone because she expected the call telling her that her son was dead. Patricia's mother suggested this prayer, and Patricia began going to early morning mass every day, staying afterward to pray before the Blessed Sacrament. For 3 months, nothing seemed to change. Her son's behavior actually got worse, but Patricia kept praying. On a Tuesday morning in March, her son called her. He was crying, which she hadn't heard in years. He said he had woken up that morning with an overwhelming desire to get clean, and for the first time in years, he felt like it was actually possible. He asked if she would help him find a treatment program. That was 18 months ago. Patricia's son has been clean ever since, has returned to school, and has rebuilt his relationship with his family. But Patricia says the most beautiful part is that he now prays this same prayer with her every Sunday after Mass. Are you starting to see the pattern? These aren't coincidences. These aren't lucky breaks. These are direct interventions from heaven in response to faithful prayer before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. Let me ask you this. What would it mean to your life if your urgent need was resolved? How would it change your family, your relationships, your future? Can you allow yourself to hope that God might work that same miracle for you? But I need to be honest with you about something. This prayer doesn't work like magic. God isn't a cosmic vending machine where you insert the right prayer and get the exact result you want. Sometimes God's answer is different from what we expect, but it's always better than what we could have imagined. Take Linda from Phoenix. She prayed this prayer desperately for her marriage to be saved. Her husband had already filed for divorce and moved out. Linda spent hours before the Blessed Sacrament, pleading with Jesus to bring her husband home. For 6 months, she prayed with tears streaming down her face. The divorce went through. Linda was devastated. She felt like God had abandoned her, like the prayer hadn't worked. But 6 months later, Linda met David, a widower who shared her faith and her values. They fell deeply in love and married 2 years later. Linda told me, "God didn't give me what I wanted. He gave me what I needed, and it was better than anything I could have hoped for." Sometimes the miracle isn't changing your circumstances. Sometimes the miracle is changing you so that you can handle your circumstances with grace, peace, and even joy. There's something about St. Anthony's relationship with the Eucharist that most people don't know, and it's the key to understanding why this prayer is so powerful. Anthony didn't just believe in the real presence intellectually. He experienced it personally in ways that were almost mystical. Historical records tell us that Anthony would sometimes be found in ecstasy before the Blessed Sacrament, so absorbed in prayer that he was completely unaware of his surroundings. Other friars would find him in the chapel at all hours, sometimes standing, sometimes kneeling, sometimes prostrate on the floor, but always focused entirely on Jesus in the tabernacle. But here's what's remarkable. Anthony's most powerful sermons, his most effective miracles, his most profound insights, all came after these prolonged periods of Eucharistic prayer. It was as if his time with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament charged him with supernatural power that he then carried into his ministry. This is why your physical presence before the tabernacle is so important when you pray this prayer. You're not just reciting words into empty space. You're having a conversation with the living God. You're tapping into the same source of power that transformed a quiet Portuguese priest into one of the most effective miracle workers in church history. Let me tell you about something that happened to me personally. Last year, I was facing a crisis in my own family that seemed impossible to resolve. Without going into details, I can tell you that it involved a situation that had been deteriorating for over 5 years, where every human attempt at resolution had failed, where relationships had been damaged, perhaps beyond repair. I started praying this prayer every morning before dawn in my parish church. For weeks, nothing seemed to change on the surface. But something was changing in me. I found myself less angry, more peaceful, more willing to forgive, more open to possibilities I hadn't considered before. Then, completely unexpectedly, the other person involved in the situation reached out to me with a proposal for reconciliation that addressed every concern I had raised over the years. The conversation that followed was the most honest, most healing discussion we had ever had. The relationship was not only restored, but became stronger than it had ever been. Was this a miracle? I believe it was. Not because the circumstances changed in a supernatural way, but because hearts were changed, pride was softened, and love was given a chance to work. You might be wondering how often you should pray this prayer, where you should pray it, what time of day is best. Let me give you some practical guidance based on the experiences of people who have seen remarkable results. First, consistency is more important than duration. It's better to spend 10 minutes every day before the Blessed Sacrament than to spend 2 hours once a week. St. Anthony made Eucharistic prayer a daily habit, and you should too. Second, early morning seems to be particularly powerful. There's something about starting your day with Jesus that sets a tone of trust and surrender that carries through all your activities. Many people who have experienced miracles through this prayer report that their most significant breakthroughs came during early morning prayer sessions. Third, don't just pray this prayer and leave. Spend some time in silent listening afterward. God speaks, but rarely in the dramatic ways we expect. More often, he speaks through a sense of peace, a sudden insight, an unexpected opportunity, a change in perspective. Here's something beautiful that happened to Angela from Miami. She had been praying this prayer for her unemployed husband for 2 months. One morning, after finishing the prayer, she felt an unusual urge to check her email immediately. There was a message from a former colleague offering her husband a job that was perfect for his skills and paid more than his previous position. The colleague later told Angela's husband that she had been thinking about him for some reason and had suddenly remembered that his expertise was exactly what her company needed for a new project. She said she had never contacted a former colleague's spouse before, but something had compelled her to reach out. Another practical tip: bring a small notebook with you when you pray. After spending time with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, write down any thoughts, impressions, or ideas that come to mind. You'll be amazed at how often these insights turn out to be important guidance for your situation. David from Seattle told me that his breakthrough came not during the prayer itself, but through an idea that occurred to him while sitting quietly afterward. He had been struggling with a legal problem that seemed to have no solution. After praying this prayer for several weeks, he suddenly thought of an approach that none of his lawyers had suggested. It worked perfectly and resolved his case in a fraction of the time everyone had predicted. Here's something else to consider: invite others to pray with you occasionally. There's special power in communal prayer, especially when it's focused on Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. Some parishes have Eucharistic adoration groups where people pray together for urgent needs. If your parish doesn't have this, suggest starting one. I know that some of you watching this video are in situations that feel absolutely hopeless. You've tried everything, prayed everything, hoped for so long that hope itself has become painful. You might be thinking, this sounds wonderful for other people, but my situation is different. My problem is too big, too complicated, too far gone. Let me tell you about the darkest period in St. Anthony's own life, because even saints face times when hope seems impossible. In 1220, Anthony volunteered to be a missionary in Morocco, full of zeal to preach the gospel and perhaps even die as a martyr. But when he arrived, he became seriously ill and was unable to do any of the work he had planned. Disappointed and weakened, he had to return to Europe, but the ship was blown off course by storms and ended up in Sicily instead of Portugal. Anthony found himself alone, sick, discouraged, in a foreign place with no clear purpose or direction. He probably wondered if God had forgotten him, if his dreams of serving Christ were just foolish fantasies. It was during this dark period that Anthony discovered the transformative power of Eucharistic prayer. Unable to do anything else, he spent hours before the Blessed Sacrament, not asking for anything specific, but simply being present to Jesus and allowing Jesus to be present to him. Slowly, Anthony's strength returned, not just physical strength, but spiritual strength, emotional strength, and a clarity of purpose he had never experienced before. When he finally began preaching in Italy, the power that flowed through him was unlike anything anyone had seen before. The point is this: sometimes God allows us to reach the end of our own resources so that we can discover his unlimited resources. Sometimes the miracle isn't getting what you want when you want it. Sometimes the miracle is being transformed through the waiting, so that when God's answer comes, you're ready to receive it and use it for good. Let me share one more story that might encourage you if you're in a particularly dark place. Thomas from London wrote to me about his daughter who had been in a coma for 4 months after a car accident. The doctors said there was minimal brain activity and virtually no chance of recovery. They were suggesting that the family consider removing life support. Thomas and his wife began praying this prayer together every day in the hospital chapel. For 3 months, nothing changed. Their daughter's condition remained the same. Thomas told me that there were days when the prayer felt like empty words, when he wondered if anyone was listening, when he questioned whether God cared about their suffering. But they kept praying, not because they felt particularly faithful, but because it was the only thing left to do. On a Thursday morning in November, 7 months after the accident, their daughter opened her eyes and asked for water. Within 2 weeks, she was speaking normally. Within 2 months, she was walking. Today, she's completely recovered with no lasting effects from her injuries. The doctors called it medically inexplicable. Thomas calls it the fruit of desperate prayer. His daughter calls it a second chance to live for God. But here's what Thomas says was equally miraculous: the way their family was transformed during those months of waiting and praying. They learned to treasure each moment, to find joy in small things, to support each other through crisis, to trust God even when they couldn't understand His timing. We're coming to the end of our time together, but this isn't really an ending. This is an invitation to experience the same miraculous power that has transformed countless lives through prayer to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, with the intercession of Saint Anthony of Padua. Right now, as you're watching this video, Jesus Christ is present in thousands of tabernacles around the world. He's not sleeping. He's not too busy with cosmic affairs to notice your urgent need. He's waiting, hoping, longing for you to come to Him with your burdens, your fears, your impossible situations. And Saint Anthony, the miracle worker who found his power in Eucharistic prayer, is ready to carry your petition before the throne of grace. He knows what it's like to feel lost, discouraged, overwhelmed by circumstances beyond your control. He's been where you are, and He's eager to help you find the same source of strength that transformed his life. But you have to take the first step. You have to make the decision to go to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. You have to commit to daily prayer, to persistent faith, to trust that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't match your timing. I want you to do something right now. In the comments section below, write the name of someone you know who needs a miracle. Don't write details about their situation, just their first name. This will create a community of prayer where we're all interceding for each other's urgent needs. There's incredible power when believers join together in faith. Also, share this video with anyone you know who's facing an impossible situation. You might be the instrument God uses to bring hope into someone's darkest hour. You might be the person who introduces them to the prayer that changes everything. And please, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I share content regularly about the power of prayer, the lives of the saints, and the incredible ways God works in ordinary people's lives. You don't want to miss testimonies and teachings that could strengthen your faith and increase your hope. Let me leave you with this thought. The same Jesus who worked miracles 2,000 years ago is the same Jesus who waits for you in the tabernacle today. His power hasn't diminished. His love hasn't cooled. His desire to help you hasn't changed. Saint Anthony discovered the secret of accessing this power through Eucharistic prayer, and now that secret is yours. The question isn't whether God can work a miracle in your situation. The question is whether you'll give Him the chance. Your urgent need, whatever it is not too big for God. Your hope, however faint it might seem, is not foolish. Your prayer, however desperate it might feel, is not unheard. Go to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. Pray with Saint Anthony. Trust in God's perfect timing and infinite love. And then watch, really watch, for the miracle that's already on its way to you. The God of the impossible is waiting for you. The miracle worker, Saint Anthony, is ready to intercede for you, and the prayer that has changed thousands of lives is now in your hands. What will you do with this gift? The choice and the miracle are yours.